Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I know it's been like over a week since I last posted. As I've said a bunch, I am in the process of opening a bar. My bar is opening this weekend, which is super, super cool and exciting. But I have been so busy with that I just haven't had time to post. However, I have finished a book up recently, and I just want to do a review of that right before I do my February wrap-up, and that is Black Tide by Casey Jones. Now, this book I got in Nightworm's package, I want to say a couple years ago. Yeah, this came out in 2022, and I have heard a lot of great things about this book. I'd never heard of the author before, so kind of just sat in my TBR pile, kind of towards the bottom of it. And then I saw it pop up on a couple like lists and like kind of recommended on Reddit as well as Goodreads. So I picked it up. I knew that it was kind of like a end of the world apocalypse story set on a beach. So to me, that screamed very, very summer vibes. It is still the dead of winter, but I wanted a little bit of warmth. Unfortunately, this doesn't have too much to do with the summer at all because it is set in October during the off season in a beach town. But that's all right. That's all right. So I'm going to read the back of the book. We're going to chat about this. I'm going to talk about a few spoilers towards the end, just because I don't think I can do this review without these particular spoilers. But they're not going to be too focused on the actual plot. I won't really be talking too much about spoiling the plot if you do want to listen. It's more about the fate of an animal in this story. So if you are somebody who doesn't like reading about animal cruelty or things happening to pets in horror stories, that is something to be aware that something happens in the story. And I'm going to talk about it because I have a lot of feelings on it, and some things that I want to say. So there will be a slight spoiler section at the end, but that's primarily what it's going to focus on, because if you've been on my channel for a while, you know that I really do not I don't like reading about harm to animals in horror. I read horror for escapism, and that's something that really upsets me, and I have a lot of feelings on what happens in this book. So, let's read the back. It was just another day at the beach when the world ended. Mike and Beth were strangers before the night of a meteor shower. Chance made them neighbors. A bottle of champagne brought them together, and a shared need for human connection sparked something more. Following their drunken and desperate one-night stand, the two discover the astronomical event has left widespread destruction in its wake. But the cosmic light show was only part of something much bigger and far more terrifying. When a lost car key leaves them stranded on an empty stretch of Oregon coast and inhuman screams echo from the dunes, when the rising tide reaches for their car, and unspeakable horrors close in around them, these two self-destructive souls might fight to survive a nightmare of apocalyptic scale. Okay. Calling these two characters self-destructive is very, very nice. These two are such similar characters with such similar flaws that the fact that this story kind of switches between their two perspectives, depending on what chapter you're in, drove me crazy because it felt like the same voice. There's a couple chapters that are done with another narrator as the lead, but for the most part, I really couldn't get behind the tonal shift between the Beth and Mike chapters, solely because they were so similar in just the way they spoke. And at first I was kind of like, maybe Casey Jones struggles to write from a different voice, but then there are several chapters with another voice in it, and I was like, oh, no, he very much can write characters from different voices, but the backstories and kind of state of the lives and struggles that both Beth and Mike are facing are so similar that they really began to blur as one major character. Another thing that just the premise of this book kills me is everything that really, apart from the fact that like the world is ending and there's this like apocalyptic event that happens that was way more complicated than needed to be. I felt like there was a lot of exposition and characters kind of understanding what was happening without any direct explanation as to why those characters were able to figure out exactly what was happening with such clarity. Apart from all of that, the major plot point of this book that sets everything into motion, aside from these alien creatures all of a sudden descending upon Earth, is based on somebody dropping a car key over the course of like a 10-second period and then not being able to find it. And like, I kid you not, like, this whole story is set over the course of, like, I don't know, maybe like 72 hours, with primarily like 12 hours being the meat of the book. And everything is based off the fact that these two people cannot keep track of a car key. And that just kind of set the tone for who these characters were. They're just constantly making really dumb decisions over and over and over and over and over and over again, to the point that it was just like aggravating to read about. And yes, like, I understand like the panic and the franticness of like being in a situation like that, but dropping this car key is just something that I don't think like common logical people would do. Like, maybe if you don't drive a car very often, but I feel like anybody who drives a car, and it is established that both of them drive cars, like, you hold on to your key. And that just drove me absolutely insane. The fact that so much horrible stuff happens from this one moment, and then it just keeps consistently coming back to, like, well, if only I had that car key kind of thing. And it just really, really drove me crazy. Crazy. And I just really couldn't get behind either Mike or Beth. I guess Mike's story made a little bit more sense. He's a very, very self-destructive person, but I felt like his backstory really, really explained that, whereas Beth's didn't do so as much. Her backstory really just made her poor decisions seem more and more and more immature the more we dove into them. And for some reason, there's like a prologue to this book told from like the perspective of Beth, kind of looking back on like where she grew up. And it just felt so out of place, as if like the author needed to give more backstory on Beth and couldn't find a way to fit it naturally into the narrative. So he just like threw it at the very front of the book, and it like completely different tone, completely different style of writing than anywhere else in the story. And it just felt very, very forced. And she just felt like a very, very unlikable character. And I just didn't understand this kind of whirlwind relationship that Mike and Beth have so quickly and fall so hard. And yes, like, it's the end of the world and things are dire and things are extreme, but it just felt unnatural in a way. Like, I just didn't quite see the progression. There are these moments where they're both talking about the other, like to themselves or to the reader or whatnot, about the way that they're feeling about one another. And I'm kind of like, you've known this person for like 18 hours? Like, what? And it was just very, very strange for me to get behind them. And then they just, the constant bickering and fighting was a lot. Then we get into the creature design. And the creature design reminded me actually quite a lot of All the Fiends of Hell from Adam Neville. I felt a lot of similarities between the proximity of the ocean and the way that there was different creatures and the way that they all carried themselves and how they interacted with both other creatures as well as the human race. Like, I thought all of that was very, very interesting, but again, very similar to All the Fiends of Hell, except I think this book came out beforehand. So it was just something that I noticed was very, very similar. I thought the creature design was a little confusing, primarily because I could never get a sense of scale. And I felt like scale was really, really, really important because we were constantly comparing the size of the creatures to vehicles. A lot of this book is dependent on sheltering inside different vehicles. And I felt like depending on how the drama of the story was unfolding, the sizes of these creatures kind of changed to fit that particular narrative. And so that just made it a little hard for me to grasp exactly what was going on with that. And then just getting back to kind of like the cataclysmic event that causes this quote-unquote like end of the world scenario. Very cool, very interesting, really, really, really unique concept in my mind. And I'm not going to spoil that for you because I do think it's something worth reading the book and figuring it out. But the fact that Beth was able to like piece together exactly what it all meant in this like moment of like exposition to the reader just felt so unreal. Like, I just couldn't believe that that would happen, especially since they're under so much like stress. Like, I feel like this is something that would probably be figured out after they've like escaped a certain scenario and have had like time to like digest what's going on. Not something that would be like figured out and explained to the reader at the height of all of the drama. It just felt a little bit strange. So So I'm going to get into two major spoilers right now. And basically I don't really necessarily think that they do much to ruin the overall plot of the book. One of them kind of does. But they're just like the things that really made me drop this book down to a 2-star read. I think it started off kind of at like a 4-star read. Like I really enjoyed like the first 50 pages. I really liked the pacing, the tone, the prose, the story, the characterizations. And then after that, everything started to get really muddy and confusing and jumbled together, which kind of dropped it down to like a 3-star read. And then by the ending, between like the twist and what happens to an animal, it just dropped down to a 2 stars. It's not a 1-star because I do think there's like kind of like merit and like, again, a really, really interesting concept to the story. And I really do like the cover because it really does show exactly the setting of the story. It's a really great snapshot of what's going on. But yeah, the ending concepts, the ending plot points of this story really hit it down to a 2 stars for me, and I really couldn't get behind it. So spoilers are starting now. I'm going to talk about the animal thing first, and then I'm going to go into like a larger spoiler. So if you want to stay to hear what happens or why, like if you should read the book because of the animal situation, definitely listen to this part, and then you can tune out if you don't want spoilers for like kind of like the twist or whatnot. But the main story introduces a character named Jake, and Jake is a dog. I believe it's a golden retriever that Beth is house sitting and watching over the dog. And the dog's a very good boy, very brave boy, and you kind of sense from the very beginning that he's going to be a character from the start. And there's this kind of foreshadowing element at the very beginning of Beth kind of leaving the dog behind to fit her own needs. And a great moment of growth, in my opinion, would be if Beth doesn't do that later on when it actually matters. And she does. The dog is written in a way in which it gets potentially mortally wounded at one point, kind of protecting Beth and Mike in a really bad way. The author then gives us a ton of hope that the dog will pull through. And it's kind of heartbreaking and it's long, and it has these moments of like love and care and concern. Another character is introduced who kind of becomes like the voice of the reader, who shows great concern and love for Jake the dog. And it builds up all of this hope for you. And then sets up a scenario in which Jake kind of becomes this hero again, protecting Mike and Beth and kind of giving them a chance to survive. And instead of looking at Jake, even though he is very, very, very injured, instead of looking at Jake as like a member of their unit and a member of their pack, Beth once again just leaves him to fight off a creature and die. And that pissed me off so much because it didn't need to be written that way. And there's a couple scenes where like the dog jumps in to save the day, and just everybody seems to forget about the dog. And like, I'm a dog owner. I would go after my dog no matter what. No matter what. Like, member of the family, no matter what. And it was just like the way that this author allows this dog to get hurt, because again, he wrote the book, so he makes it happen. It didn't give me the emotional payoff that I felt like it needed, because then it gave the reader all of this hope that the dog was going to pull through for pages and pages and pages and pages and chapters and chapters and chapters, just to rip the Band-Aid off and stab you in the wound all over again. And I hated that. It left this really, really, really icky taste in my mouth, and I was not okay with it. And then he kind of writes this almost like aside, like just to like satisfy the people like me reading the book, being like, oh, we're so sad about it. It's really sad, right? And then they go back to Mike's house, and in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, Jake will probably be there because he was like running along the beach, like fighting the monster. There's this opportunity to once again have Jake show up and like survive, and we can have this happy ending, and I won't feel so icky about everything. And they just don't. It all of a sudden becomes like a ghost story, like this like haunting story, and I was like, where is this coming from? And it just didn't make any ounce of sense to me, and it left this really icky taste in my mouth because I felt like the dog was literally just there to cheaply toy with our emotions because we have such emotionally devoid characters in front of us. And I didn't like that. I found it very, very cheap in its emotional grab bag from the reader. So, hated that. Really, 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 really hated that. Next up, now I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the spoiler situation. A little bit deeper, guys. We have the character of Natalia. First off, once Natalia's dad is eaten or disappeared, whatever, and everybody's rushing away, these are all people who know Natalia. You're telling me not a single one of these adults saw that man disappear from the face of the earth in front of his daughter and didn't say, oh, honey, you need to come with me? And even Beth is like, yeah, I saw her go away. Like, it was written so poorly. Like, even I was like, wait, there was a kid there a second ago, and now we've just completely forgotten about the kid. Like, what? What? So then, it's like just kind of cop-out moment where all of a sudden the kid is back there conveniently to save the day in a car that has the keys where she's been hiding. And what does she do? She pops her head out to see Beth and Mike, like, getting it on in the car. And that was so weird to me, especially with Jake sitting there, like, bleeding out. That was what they chose to do. Like, it just read such, like, male author writing woman. Like, that kind of, like, weird cliche. And it was just, like, bizarre. And then, like, the kid is, like, watching it from afar, being, like, trying to process what they're seeing. And I was like, this is just weird and icky and, again, unrealistic. It has, like, this, like, again, like, just the blatant disrespect for the dog dying in the back was just killing me. And then you have Natalia, and she's an interesting character. She's the voice that kind of, you could really tell when it was a Natalia chapter. Like, I wasn't getting the Beth and Mike chapters confused with the Natalia chapters by any means. But it's just, like, annoying scenario of explaining how stick shift works. It just felt so, like such a cheap kind of cop-out of an ending to just throw that all there. And I just honestly don't even know how I feel about just, like, how convenient it was that Natalia's car was, of course, like, the perfect vehicle to survive an apocalypse because her dad was, like, so obsessed with survival tactics, and yet he's the first one to, like, just flat go out. And, like, I really didn't want that book to, I didn't really want the book to just be them stranded on the beach for as long as it was, and that's just, like, entirely what it was. I wanted to know more about the world, more about what was happening. At the end, you've got that big giant that walks by the house. Like, I want to know what's happening there. We get that glimpse of it with, like, the radio broadcast, and when Beth calls the 911 operator, which I thought was a really, really great, chilling scene. But I wanted more from that. And it just stayed on the opening sequence. Like, this was a novel that really never left its, like, intro to the second act. Like, nothing, like, if that car key had been picked up, we could have had a whole driving situation where they grab Natalia, they grab Jake, and then they're driving up the coast, and all of these things can happen as they're trying to get to Veronia, or whatever it was called, driving along the coast. But just being trapped in this situation by stupidity and getting drunk on the beach when you guys are also supposed to be driving, it just made no sense to me, and it was so self-destructive, and it just didn't work for me. So this was a 2-star read. I had really, really high hopes going into it, but I just couldn't get behind it as it continued on, and I just really didn't like our main characters. I really didn't like some of their motivations. I found the prose difficult to differentiate between our two leads. I thought the kind of, like, cop-out ending bothered me, and I just hated what happened to Jake. I don't think he deserved that. He was such a good boy in this, and honestly probably, like, the only good character. And yeah, I don't know. Wanted to love it, really, really didn't. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. I'm going to get back to posting on Saturdays soon, once this bar opens. But if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah!